Hello everybody and welcome to another Fight in Focus. I'm Josh Chernoff and today we are here to talk all about the Vitor Belfort versus the one and only returning Evander Holyfield. Not the match we thought we were going to see, and we will talk all about that. Of course, also Anderson Silva versus Tito Ortiz and so much more. But let's get to the esteemed panel that we have for you today. First, he is a personality, to say the least, in the combat sports world. Please welcome the Schmo.
It's a pleasure to be back, gentlemen. Josh, thanks for the introduction. The show moves on. We move from Los Angeles to Hollywood, Florida.
The show moves on, and moving on from the Schmo, we're going to go to the one and only Dan Rafael. Dan, thank you so much for being back here.
Oh, glad to be back on with you guys. And like the Schmo said, going from Los Angeles to Hollywood, Florida. And as you mentioned in the intro, not the fight we expected. We thought it would be Belfort versus Oscar De La Hoya coming out of a lengthy retirement. He came down with COVID-19. He's out, and the great Evander Holyfield is in. Still some intrigue there. Totally different kind of fight than maybe we were getting, but still something certainly to talk about.
Absolutely. And here to talk about that with us is, of course, Andreas Hale. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, what a pleasure it is to be back. This is going to be one hell of a conversation because we have a very interesting fight on our hands.
Well, for a conversation like this, I need to bow out and we need to bring in the man, the myth, the legend. Matt Stryker is here to host. Matt, take it away.
Josh, thank you so much. And by the way, Josh, congratulations, man. Great job that you're doing with all the stuff with AEW and FITE. So a tip of the cap from all of us here. Right, guys? I mean, it's nice to see one of our own breaking through.
Thank you very much.
All right. And I think that's a great way to start this conversation, gentlemen, because what we have here for combat sports is something that people have been clamoring for quite some time. Now, it's not new. They've been doing it forever. But at this level, with all the new eyes and everyone starting to mix and match, whether exhibition or pure contest, it has to be great for the combat sports world. Schmo, I'm going to start with you because you've had more than your toe. You're waist deep in that type of marketing aspect and how to make it unique and new and hook people again. So what do you see September 11th?
Well, if you were to say to the Schmo, hey, we're going to get a matchup of future Hall of Famer Spider Anderson Silva against Tito Ortiz, we're going to see this match, and you told the Schmo was going to be in a boxing ring, you said this to the Schmo a couple years ago, I'd say you're out of your freaking mind. But that's what we have here, September 11th. And the Schmo is so intrigued that we're going to see a guy in his mid-40s and a Tito Ortiz cut down to 195 pounds to box Anderson and Spider Silva. And then we're going to get Joe Fournier, who is a good friend, a sparring partner, going up against David Haye, a champion at 2 divisions. I mean, this guy was on the Triller fight card when he was on the undercard with Ben Askren and Jake Paul. So he's not new to the circus. He's not new to the show. There's intrigue there. And then you got Evander, the real deal Holyfield, 14 years older than Vitor Belfort, stepping in. Because of this man, you're moving the entire fight card from California to Florida. It reminds the Schmo of UFC 232 in December of 2018 when the Nevada State Athletic Commission, they wouldn't license John Jones for the infamous pictograms. So they moved the show to the Forum all the way to they moved the show from Vegas all the way to the Forum. But this time, California State Athletic Commission, they're not going to sanction. They're not going to sanction Evander Holyfield. And this isn't the first time Evander Holyfield hasn't been sanctioned. The New York State Athletic Commission wouldn't license Holyfield back in 2005. That's 16 years ago. But now we bring the show to Florida, and we get to see Evander Holyfield. And there was some legal issues that Evander Holyfield has had with Triller, and now they reunite. So everything comes together. This whole smorgasbord of entertainment meets sport, the crossovers of the MMA, the boxers, the entertainers with music. And heck, it's going to be one hell of a show on the 20th anniversary of September 11th. Craziness.
And that's an interesting point when you look at it from a human emotion element. And Andreas, I'm going to turn to you because you don't pull any punches. And you and I have had some off-camera conversations about where combat sports is going. So what about the emotional tie, the pull, the lure of the new fan? How does it all tie in?
Man, it's really intriguing. I mean, listen, it's Evander the real deal Holyfield, a man who is nearly 60 years old and looks better than me. I mean, the guy's physique is incredible. He's fighting Vitor Belfort, who had arguably the best hands in the UFC. So there's this interesting element in combat sports. Can the real deal get it done at his advanced age against a former world champion in the UFC, world champion contender? And then you look at Tito Ortiz versus Anderson Silva, and boxing. That's like Schmo said. Look, let's call it the circus, but the circus is coming to town, and I'm so intrigued by this. And it's happening on 9/11, which is a somber time for this country. But I think this event's going to bring us great joy because it's so utterly ridiculous that I'm all in. I'm sold on this thing. So, look, if you have nothing else to do on 9/11, pull up a chair, get some popcorn. You're going to see some good fights. Look, sometimes it's not the best fighters all the time that make the best fights. Sometimes you need a little bit of craziness in there. And I fully expect Vitor Belfort and Evander Holyfield to give us a hell of a fight. It may not be the most technically sound thing that we ever seen, but it's going to be a lot of oohs and ahs because at the end of the day, everything is pro wrestling.
That is really well said. And Dan, now I turn to you here, just as a writer, a journalist, a student of boxing, the sweet science. Everyone's talking about Evander Holyfield. Evander represents a lot to a generation. A lot of people connect Evander and Mike Tyson. And we can go down the list of the boxers on this card. But starting with Evander, what does it mean to that lapsed fan, if you will?
Well, he's one of the biggest names of modern times in boxing. And so for all of the great young stars there are in the sport today, whether you're talking about Canelo Alvarez or Anthony Joshua, move on down to, the Errol Spences and Terrence Crawford, Lomachenko, Lopez, Teofimo Lopez. There's a lot of great star power in boxing. But then there's the star level of an Evander Holyfield who comes from that generation with the Tyson, with De La Hoya, who obviously was originally supposed to be on the show. And everybody's heard of Evander Holyfield. So my mom is not a boxing fan, but if you ask her if she knows Evander Holyfield, she knows Evander Holyfield. She doesn't necessarily know those other people. Not to say she's going to be watching on Saturday night, but the point is there's probably not a place you can go in America, in most places in the world, where people who follow any semblance of sports don't know who Evander Holyfield is. And you hear his name and he's fighting. And then a lot of people are going to be sort of intrigued by that. Then when you hear that he's fighting, a championship superstar from the MMA world in a boxing ring, then there's a little bit more, like Andreas and the Schmo said, a little craziness, a little circus element to it, which is fun. So, I mean, look, me, we've done these shows a bunch of times. I take it kind of seriously, of course. So while I don't view this as like some serious, championship level, pound for pound implication kind of fight, it's like kind of a fun thing. Evander Holyfield is not fought for 11 years, but by all accounts, he's been training like a madman for a while. I've seen Evander in the not too distant past, like Andreas said. The guy's in unbelievable condition. He's passed all his medical tests. So at 58 years old, he's probably in better shape than most people at his age and many people that are much younger than him. Belfort is a novice boxer. He's had one professional fight. So, it's a fair playing field from that standpoint. And, there's intrigue there. And we've discussed a little bit about some of the fights on the undercard. Look, Anderson Silva is not a boxer, but he came off a very big upset win against Chavez Jr. that took place this past June, where he surprised a lot of people in the skills that he showed against Chavez, who may not be at his best, but at least has been a professional boxer for a number of years. And he clearly won that fight. Now he's fighting a guy coming over from the UFC also. So I'm kind of interested in that fight because, I don't watch a lot of MMA, but certainly their names precede them. I know Anderson Silva. I know Tito Ortiz. So to see them compete in the sport that I love and follow, I'm kind of interested in that also. So I look forward to seeing that. I look forward to seeing what Belfort can do in the boxing ring, what Evander still may be able to do in the boxing ring. And then you throw in John O'Carroll and Andy Vences, two, sort of like second tier but hungry contenders in the 130-pound weight class in a real fight that's going to put the winner, in a pretty good position to get closer to a world championship fight. I'm in.
It's smart when you look at it from the boxing aspect, because I mentioned the lapse fan. That dedicated hardcore fan is watching. That dedicated hardcore fan remembers a guy like Hay went 12 with Klitschko and couldn't dispatch Tony Bellew in his last two. He does have a win over Ruiz, and people are going to be here to see that. But Schmo, when we use these terms, novice with his hands and things like that, are those entirely accurate? Or are people going to be surprised for the fact that Belfort's going to be able to throw? I don't think he can stand there and bang in with Evander Holyfield. Evander's boxing skill is still just going to be too slick. But the heavy-handedness, I mean, one punch can make a night, no?
One punch can make a night, and let's remember this: Vitor Belfort is a southpaw, and Evander Holyfield, the real deal, he's 1-3 against southpaws. That's something to take note. And we're talking about a real age difference here. When Mike Tyson, when we saw him on the Triller card against Roy Jones Jr., there was only 3 years in age difference apart. We're talking 14 years apart. There's a difference in athleticism here. They're both physical specimens, okay? They both look great. They both are fantastic, great shape. Schmo wants to say this, though, regarding the real deal Holyfield. A couple years ago, he was making his rounds on Super Bowl Radio Row in Atlanta. The Schmo interviewed Evander Holyfield for the first time then. Now, Evander Holyfield, we asked him, hey, man, you look like you're in great shape. You spar, you getting your rounds in. And Evander's like, no, 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 no. If I get hit, I'm calling 911. And there's, subtle, nice, humoristic way. So a couple years ago, gentlemen, he wasn't sparring. He wasn't getting into this. So he might have been hitting pads and he might be looking great. But how much training and work is he really getting with real humans relatively in the past couple of years? Now, Vitor Belfort, the Schmo knows he's active. He was looking to do a comeback with one championship. Obviously, the last time we saw him in the cage, it was a couple years ago. He got knocked out by Lyoto Machida, and we haven't seen him since. But Vitor Belfort, man, the age and athleticism and his striking capabilities, hey, he's got a chance.
Andreas, 8 2-minute rounds. We don't know yet, unless Dan or either one of you guys have the report about the ounce of the gloves and any of the other gear and stuff like that. But what do you make of what Schmo said there with regard to the fact of what Belfort can try and do on Saturday?
I mean, it's youth, right? I mean, at the end of the day, Father Time is undefeated, and when Evander Holyfield hasn't fought in so many years, it's not like somebody that's in their 30s and not fighting until they're 35. The reflexes are still kind of there. Evander is 58 years old. That is old. Vitor Belfort has hands. He's not coming in here like a guy who's a novice to striking like Ben Askren. Vitor Belfort has always had hands. So it's really going to boil down to reflexes and punch resistance. Can Evander Holyfield still take a punch, especially to the body? I'm very curious about these things. As you get older, a lot of fighters don't want to get hit in the body anymore. And if you have a sustained attack to the body, could change everything. However, 8 2-minute rounds gives Evander a lot of time to work. Could he still have it? I don't know. But I'm so intrigued by this. To some people, it's nonsense. To me, it's candy. This is the stuff that I like. I like the popcorn. Give it all to me. Because what's going to happen is I have no idea what the hell is going to happen in this fight. Because of that, I'm sold. Evander could win. Vitor could win. Will I be surprised either way? Nope. But I think I'm going to be entertained.
Dan, a few months ago, I did a celebrity boxing show, and Terrible Tim Witherspoon was on the card, and I got to watch him from literally the second row. And these guys, they don't lose it. Evander hasn't lost it. Is the world going to see that boxing reigns supreme on Saturday?
It's hard to say, and it's largely based on the fact that there has been so many years past. It's not so much that Evander's 58, because he's in great condition by all accounts. He's been in the gym. Remember, he was getting ready for what was supposed to be an exhibition match with Kevin McBride, the heavyweight who also defeated Mike Tyson. And he had some issues with Triller. I think this is sort of going to help pave the way to get rid of those issues. But the point is, he was preparing for a number of months for a boxing match, sparring and doing the things it takes to get ready. So I'm not so much worried about the fact that he's 58. It's that he hasn't had an actual boxing match since 2011, which was his last fight. He had tried to fight other times. It didn't work. They tried to make the exhibition with Tyson. He ended up fighting Roy Jones instead, so that didn't happen. So it's the length of time he's been out of the ring. But what makes it more of a way for me to pick Evander in the fight is the fact that it is 2-minute rounds. That for somebody that's so accustomed to 3 minutes, for Evander to do 2 minutes, even at 58, even after 11 years, shouldn't be that complicated, all things considered. So to me, that is sort of levels the playing field of whatever you may think the difference may be because of the length of time he's been out of the ring. And of course, if you take into account the fact that he is 58 years old. So there is intrigue there. Will boxing reign supreme? I usually have a strong opinion about these things. In this particular fight, because of all the factors I just mentioned, and that even though Belfort is not a boxer, he has had a boxing match in his past. He was training for a boxing match with Oscar De La Hoya. He will be the smaller man, but not by a dramatic amount, because Evander's not a huge heavyweight, probably be about 220 something. Belfort was training for a fight that was contract with De La Hoya at 185. He's probably relieved he doesn't have to get down all the way to 185. That'll probably be closer, 195 maybe by the time the fight happens. Not that out of the realm in terms of the difference that you see in a normal heavyweight fight. I say flip a coin in this situation. I just do not know. I mean, again, that's one of the intriguing elements of it. If you're into these guys and the knowledge that you may tune in to this card and not really know for sure who's going to win. We all, let's admit it, there are fights of the biggest level on the biggest stage, huge championship fights where you kind of go in, no, I know who's winning that fight. Now, this may not be at that championship pound for pound level, but I don't think that anybody truly knows who's winning this fight.
And I think that's what makes it so amazingly entertaining. And it's also what drives the viewership. There are very few things left where people clamor and go, I have to see it first, as opposed to seeing things second and third hand. It's becoming commonplace with social media. So, Schmo, is there a fight in this genre? Now that the Pauls and Triller and all of these guys, is there something you think is going to draw the masses? What's the one marquee fight? What is the Michael Jordan versus CM Punk? Whatever it could possibly be in your mind.
Well, if you were to ask the Schmo this question about 6 months ago, easily would have said Jake Paul versus Conor McGregor, because then you're getting Jake Paul calling out the biggest combat sports star in the history. Well, not combat sports star, sorry, MMA sports star. We can argue and debate who the greatest combat sports star is of all time, but Conor McGregor certainly has left his mark in the MMA world. And obviously he went on to box a Floyd Mayweather. So if you were to ask the Schmo that question 6 months ago, but it's hard to say that answer now because so much crap is developing. Now, since Jake Paul's won, you got Jorge Masvidal, who was a top 4 draw in the UFC, wanting to get involved with this too. And then what you see in this situation is you see a lot of these MMA cats trying to go to the boxing world, but you see very few of the boxing cats going into the MMA world. That's why the Schmo's got all the respect in the world for a Clarissa Shields, because she's trying to do both here. So if you're going to see that crossover fight, it's likely got to be an MMA, UFC type star, and the Schmo wants to see someone active. And with Dana White at the helm, you have to get the boss man's permission in order to do that type of crossover. So it's very hard to see and predict what that's going to look like. But 6 months ago, it's Conor McGregor, it's Jake Paul. You ask the Schmo that question right now, we still need to see how these things unfold. That's why we love seeing a Evander Holyfield get back in there against a Vitor Belfort.
All right. Andreas, same kind of question to you, man. Where do you think that the big money would come from?
I mean, the story's being laid right in front of us on Saturday. If Evander Holyfield looks amazing, how many people are going to clamor to see Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson? Come on. We know what this is. We're laying the groundwork here. If Evander looks spectacular, or if he just looks really damn good, people are going to ask for that fight. The other side of this is, let's just say Anderson Silva mops Tito Ortiz, which I'm predicting. Anderson Silva versus Roy Jones is a fight that we've wanted for years because those two have wanted that so bad. We're laying the groundwork for 2 major fights, major crossover fights between an MMA and a boxer, and a legendary fight between Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson. Listen, it could be a joke to a lot of people, but I want to see it. If these two can still get it on, like we just saw Mike Tyson look amazing against Roy Jones, if Evander Holyfield turns back the clock and looks phenomenal against Vitor Belfort, you mean to tell me people aren't going to want to see Tyson Holyfield again? Sign me up tonight.
Yeah. Dan, it's that movie with De Niro and Stallone. I forget what it's called, but I think it's going to be 10 times better. What do you think about what Andreas just said there?
I mean, I agree with everything he said. I mean, he took the words right out of my mouth. Obviously, before Evander signed to fight McBride, and certainly before his opportunity against Belfort came up because of De La Hoya's withdrawal, they were trying to make Tyson versus Holyfield. Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield met in person. They talked about it. Things got a little mixed up like it often does at this level because of business and the money. But at the end of the day, they weren't able to make the fight. So they were trying to put Evander in a position where they would have to make the fight. Because, yes, Tyson can fight pretty much anybody, make a big event. Evander is fighting in this fight. I'm not sure it's at that event level. But if you put them in the ring together, I mean, it's one of the great rivalries. Or I shouldn't even say rivalry because Evander won both fights. But Tyson was such a gigantic superstar that no question that people would want to see it again. And the other fight that Andreas said, of course, Roy Jones and Anderson Silva have talked about fighting each other for, I don't know, Andreas. What has it been, like over 10 years probably? Even
Over
when they
then,
were
yeah.
both still doing very well in their respective sports. So I can definitely see that fight happening at some point. Roy Jones has wanted that. Silva talked about it not that long ago. It's still in his mind. 100% I could see that. That would mean two big, let's call them novelty fights for combat sports fans.
There you go. September 11th, stages will be set. So now, guys, predictions. You can talk about anything you want from Hay, Fournier, Silva, Ortiz, and of course the big one, Holyfield and Belfort. Schmo, floor is yours. What do you got?
The biggest lock the Schmo's going to take in this one is Anderson Silva beating Tito Ortiz. You saw what Anderson Silva recently did. He beat a boxer. Tito Ortiz, he was just a councilman. He was a councilman. He was into the whole legal scene there in Huntington Beach. The Huntington Beach bad boy was doing legal counsel. He's been out of the MMA scene for a couple of years. Yes, he's riding, a 3-fight winning streak, but look at who he's beat. And it hasn't been in a boxing ring. The Schmo is not convinced right off the bat that Tito Ortiz is going to make this weight at 195 pounds. That's what Anderson Silva says. You got to make weight 195. Tito Ortiz has been walking around close to 250, okay? And right now, at this time, I saw him do an interview with fan-sided Amy Kaplan. He was around 215 pounds. So this man still has about 20 pounds to lose, and you can't convince the Schmo it's all water weight here. We got muscle mass, we got bone density, okay? Tito Ortiz, 195. When was the last time he was 195? In high school? Come on, college age. He's not going to be at the right condition, and he's fighting a slick guy in Anderson Silva. If you're going to ask the Schmo whose MMA skill set would translate the best to the boxing ring, it's Anderson the Spider Silva. So the Schmo's biggest lock of these three fights that you just mentioned, Matt, would be Anderson Silva beating Tito Ortiz.
Andreas?
Oh my God, Schmo, you just took everything I was about to say. Listen, Tito Ortiz has never had great hands in MMA. Never. He got beat up by Chuck Liddell. He got beat up by Randy Couture. He's fighting Anderson Silva in a boxing match. I think it's going to be so fun to watch Anderson Silva beat the brakes off of Tito Ortiz. Like, it's almost the cost of admission. Like, that's worth the price right there. But we're setting the stage. So that's the lock. I'm with the Schmo on this. I'm going to pick Evander Holyfield just because I like chaos and I like to see Evander Holyfield beat up Vito Ortiz and call out Mike Tyson. It'll go viral. Twitter will be on fire on 9/11 if Evander Holyfield does that. So I'm going to pick Evander Holyfield to beat Vitor Belfort by decision. 8 2-minute rounds, not enough time to do enough work. But yeah, we're setting the stage for two really big things. But listen, I'm with Schmo 100%. If you're going to buy this for anything and you like disaster, Anderson Silva is about to cause disaster on Tito Ortiz on Saturday night.
Dan, take us home.
I mean, even with my limited knowledge of MMA, I know enough to pick Anderson Silva to, as I forget which one of the guys said it, but to mop Tito Ortiz in this particular matchup, whatever the weight situation is. The other fight between David Hay and Fournier, the heavyweight fight, they're good friends. Hay has been retired for a few years, but not that long. He's not that old. He should mop Fournier unless he goes easy on him because they're good friends outside the ring. Fournier is 9-0, but he's fought 9 guys that are probably about as tough as the 4 of us put together. But I think Hay, on a bad day should beat Fournier. And I'm no big David Hay fan. Anybody that knows or has read me for any length of time knows that. And in the main event, I'm going to be – I know we've done these before where we talked about other mixed boxing match, MMA match, where the two guys come together. I have massive respect for Holyfield. I've covered his career. I know him. He's a great guy. All respect to him. An absolute freaking legend in boxing. He is 58 years old. He hasn't fought for 10 years. I'm going with Belfort. Time waits for no man. I think he wins a decision and maybe even wears him out and stops him.
The preeminent boxing voice of a generation has just called the main event for September 11th in favor of an MMA star over a boxing legend. You heard that here first, Matt, right here. What?
I keep it real with you.
That's why that's the perfect way to bring Josh back in here, because it's resounding. There's an exclamation point there. It isn't just assumed. And also what I like about it is the conversation, and you can't find this a lot of other places, it's natural and it's real. Because here you have a boxing purist, and I'll say it to you as you sit here. Hands down, the greatest writer of an entire generation, one of the minds that sees the sport. You'd expect him to lean boxing, but he has the keen eye. And it goes back to the original question that I posed to both you guys, and Schmo and Andreas. You guys hit the nail on the head. It's changing. Everything is changing, the way we're watching and the way others are starting to watch. And we have to accept that others are starting to come in. They're going to push in on us. But as long as it stays pure and as long as it stays entertaining, Andreas, like you said, it's worth the price of admission. Josh, I always want to say thank you to you and to FITE and to Mike Weber for allowing me to be a part of these things, because I do believe that we are on the cutting edge of something special, Josh.
I couldn't agree more. Matt, thank you so much for hosting this. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Of course, the fight is Evander Holyfield versus Vitor Belfort. This is really, after listening to all of you talk, at this point, I have no idea, because I was all Holyfield. Sure. But then, as you talked about, Matt, Dan saying Holyfield's not gonna pull this one out. Who knows better than Dan? So that makes it a little tough for me to know, but that's what makes it so exciting. As Andreas, you mentioned earlier, you don't know what's going to happen, and that's part of the appeal. And the show, of course, takes place this Saturday night, September 11th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on FITE.tv, so make sure you order it now. For Dan Rafael, for Andreas Hale, for the Schmo, and of course Matt Stryker, I'm Josh Chernoff, and we will see you Saturday, September 11th, right here on FITE.